Here comes our professor and wizard, Merlin. Let's give Merlin some emojis here.
Hello, hello. I hope you're all well. We're going to learn about RAM, ROM, virtual memory, and flash memory today. I'd like to welcome back all of those who attended last week's event, for those who are new here, and I hope you enjoy your time. This lesson should cover everything. If we don't reach the end or I feel I don't cover everything, we will go back over next time, and I will push back the next unit as much as I need to, but we should cover everything today. So first we're going to go over RAM and ROM. So RAM, random access memory, is known to hold the operating system, programs that are running, and data in use by the CPU when the computer's running. Although it holds the instructions for the operating system, the CPU actually loads the operating system like the same function as a von Neumann architecture. So for those who were here in Unit 1.1, we had the memory and the CPU. Essentially, the operating system will be in the RAM, and the CPU will do the processing. The RAM is volatile, which means when the computer is switched off, all data in the RAM is wiped. So it will always have nothing left in it. Everything in the computer off, which is why it's always good to turn your computer off after you've used it. Otherwise, it gets clogged up. Because even when you've closed programs, sometimes the data will sit in there until you overwrite it. It has the ability to read and write data. Oh, okay, I can see it again. It has the ability to read and write data while the computer is switched on to programs that are running. Later on in the presentation, I'll show you a visual example on how RAM works, and that will be a visual representation on RAM and how virtual memory works with the RAM. So I'll move on to the next one. It says, what is ROM? So ROM is read-only memory. So it's the opposite of RAM. So RAM, you can read and write. This one you can read only. It's known to hold the first instructions for when the computer is switched on, which is called the bootstrap. Programs for the embedded systems like traffic lights and washing machines. I went over embedded systems last time, but I'll briefly go over that. So washing machines, you have your some washing machines have dials on the front for the different programs, like you have your cottons and black and whites and colors. Obviously, you have your different programs, and in the memory, you have all the different instructions of that. That's an embedded system. I'll show you a chart later on. I think I have one up on the slideshow. Yeah, programs from embedded systems are stored in the ROM, which essentially is a good way of showing how ROM works. It's the same as the von Neumann architecture we used in Unit 1.1. Differences between RAM and ROM, as we've already said on the second one down, RAM is read and write, whereas ROM is read only. RAM is volatile. ROM is actually non-volatile. I don't know if I mentioned that in the slide. So when you shut down the computer, the bootstrap will always stay there. So nothing's cleared off when you switch the computer off. But one thing about the ROM as well, it's the same with embedded systems. You can't actually change the data inside of the ROM. Any user or program cannot change that. So yeah, you can't actually change the ROM as soon as you've got the motherboard. So whatever bootstraps on it, you have. RAM is actually larger in comparison to ROM in the size of data capacity. So for example, you have 8 gigabytes of RAM, or 4 gigabytes is now the smallest RAM you tend to have these days, and that would be a lot larger in comparison to the ROM. As I've said, RAM is wiped when switched off, whereas ROM isn't. It's just like an embedded system wouldn't be wiped when switched off. So you turn your washing machine off. When you turn it back on, it remembers how to wash your cottons on the different program settings. How are embedded systems linked with ROM? So there's our von Neumann architecture, if you remember this. That's the CPU and memory. So embedded systems are like ROM because all the instructions that we use in the memory from the von Neumann architecture is like ROM. So the memory is the same system. You can't change it. It goes in. Whereas the von Neumann architecture, you can change it. But this is just for comparison. So it's the same system as embedded system. ROM is in there. You can't change the memory. And it's in there to instructions and data. The ROM is then linked in with the embedded system, as all the instructions for each embedded system will be stored in the ROM for the system to process. As I've said again, the example of a washing machine, it will store all the different programs and run the ones that it needs to. Okay, what is virtual memory? I know not a lot of people cover this actually classes. Virtual memory is actually space on your hard disk drive, or if you don't have a hard disk drive at all, it will be on your solid state drive. Most people do have HDDs. It will hold the data of your programs when they're not being used and are open in the background. So anything you have open that's not being executed or no programs, instructions, data is being processed by the CPU, we put into the virtual memory when the RAM is at its capacity. So you have 4 gigabytes of RAM. This is the visual diagram I'll show you in a bit. You had your, I don't know, presentation software open, your operating system's running, but you've got Chrome open in the background, which is beta for RAM. If you have it open in the background, it'll go into the virtual memory when it's not processing things. To say it's not playing music or anything, it's just a website. That'll go into the virtual memory until you reopen the page or program, I should call it. Then it'll move back into the RAM. What is now in the background will go to virtual memory, which is it takes a while to transfer, which is why people with 4 gigabytes of RAM will have slow experiences switching between. But then again, that's the reason, which I'll show you in the demonstration shortly. Why do we need virtual memory? If you have a small capacity of RAM and it's at its capacity, you will need virtual memory. You don't have to buy this or anything. It's just something that happens itself. It's needed when there's not enough physical RAM to store open programs. Programs are transferred to virtual memory when the programs aren't executing any instructions and RAM is at its capacity. That's the reason it transfers. It'll be transferred back to the RAM when needed and have instructions that are required to be executed. In further context, it holds the data and instructions of programs that the CPU isn't currently using. So that's the best way to explain it, really. Anything that's not being processed will be stored in virtual memory if your RAM is at capacity. So we've had a question a second ago. I'll carry on for now. So we're going to go through a scenario, actually, and the scenario will always be at the top, and I'll go through this bit afterwards. So the scenario is a user of a desktop PC has the operating system and presentation software open. So as you can see, this is the virtual memory. It's empty on the hard drive at the moment, and these are the pieces of software he's able to use, or he or she is able to use, the person's able to use. So you have the word processing is closed, spreadsheet closed, graphics app, and all that is closed. As you can see, we have 4 gigabytes of RAM here, and the operating system takes a fair amount of space. I'm just going to go, the line would be here. There's no black line there. You only have enough space, really, for another presentation app to be open, or spreadsheet app would just about fit in the memory, which would capacitate it. If the user decides to open the graphics application, which is quite a large, it needs a lot of RAM to run when you're editing images, like Adobe software. If the user decides to open the graphic application to edit an image for the presentation too, the problem is that there's not enough room for it to be opened in the RAM. So this is where virtual memory will step in, and this should help with your understanding of virtual memory if you don't already know what it is. So the scenario that, again, the user of a desktop PC has the operating system, presentation, and graphics application open now because he's working on the image. The user is not currently working on the open presentation. So he's not using the presentation app. He hasn't actually got it open. It's just in the background. And he's just editing the photograph to include on a slide later on. So the explanation of virtual memory in the scenario is keeping the graphics app open as the presentation app is not being used. It's held in virtual memory. So operating system will always be running, and on some systems it's a heavy requirement. Some systems won't be as much. In this demonstration, it's shown at around 2 gigabytes, which won't always be that much. But here, the graphics app takes up 2 gigabytes instead of the 1 gigabyte it showed here, which would have sat around here, so at 3 gigabyte. But as it's capacitated, the presentation app has moved to the virtual memory on the disk. We've now got that open in the background. Nothing's being processed on it except this. So we're editing the image. We're going to go on to the next scenario now. So the user's actually switched back to the presentation software without closing the graphics application. So he's kept it open, but he's switched to the presentation app. So that's why if you have a slow computer, or you think you have a slow computer, you do. But that will be because if you have 4 gigabytes of RAM, and you've opened the presentation app and you're at capacity, it's had to move it to the hard disk drive, which will take a while, and then send the presentation app back, which will take a little while longer, which is why when you switch between apps, sometimes it can be slow. So an explanation of this again is virtual memory would hold the graphics app whilst the presentation app is being used. So whilst this presentation app is open, the graphics app will close. Will be put into virtual memory, won't close, it will stay open. Which is why when you open it again, because it's a lot of RAM being used, it's a long time for it to open again, about 10-second delay, which isn't a long time in terms of time, but people using computers, they want to switch between them quickly, which I think is what the next slide is about. If we expand storage of RAM to 8 gigabytes, so the user doubles the amount of RAM in the computer to 8 gigabytes, so he's probably bought 2 sticks, 4 gigabytes, turns the computer on, opens up the presentation app, the graphics app to continue working on their presentation. So now he can have the presentation app, operating system, and graphics app all being processed at the same time, which means there's no slow process between switching between RAM and virtual memory, which means it's faster between switching apps because they're always going to be running. So this graphics app will always be processing or always be ready to run. So as soon as you click that app, click it, load up straight away, you'll have no issues, no slow time putting it back up on screen. Doubling the size of the RAM makes the computer faster because then the virtual memory won't have to swap applications around when they're not being used. So it'll always be inside the RAM because it is a long, well, we say long process, as I said, it's a long process for us when we're trying to do things as quick as we can with modern technology. So I hope that visualization gave you a bit more into the depth of how virtual memory works. So why do we need flash memory? Flash memory is known to be SSD, solid state drive. It uses integrated circuit technology, meaning it has no moving parts. So your hard disk drive, I've got a diagram of it on here. It's like a disk with a needle on it. And that's why you don't have hard disk drives in laptops, because it's something you carry around a lot and you're moving it. If the needle jumps onto the disk and it scratches it, that's it, your disk is knackered. So SSD is good for moving objects. Unit 1.3, which is what we're going to go through in the next lesson. But SSDs, basically, you use them in these things down here, the SD cards and stuff in cameras, because cameras are thrown about with GoPros and stuff. So that's why they're a good source for holding data. Flash memory stores the BIOS, basic input-output system, which must be read and write in order to store settings that will be used when the computer is turned on. Sorry, when it's turned off, it will save the data. When it's turned on, it will use that data needed. I don't think I need that pen because we don't know visualizations coming up next. Okay, so we've got a blast from the past here. Through lockdown in the UK, I decided to buy an Atari 2600. Some of you might remember these. Some of you might not. I think that's Pac-Man and Space Invaders, I think, over there. I can't quite see because of the quality of the image. But why a cartridge for a portable entertainment game system could use ROM? So why could it use ROM? This could happen when you write up the instructions for the game. You don't want to have to change them. Won't be changing them. Doing that protects the source code, as no computer or user can overwrite the instructions in a ROM because it's read-only. So you can't actually write over it, which is a way to prevent copyright, which is a way, if they did use ROM, I'm not sure if they did or not, it's a way of protecting the source code. And as well as that, nothing can be changed and you'll have no issues with the game. So you wouldn't be able to complain about it not working, because it would always be the same. So move on to the next question we have here. We're going to move on to why a cartridge for a portable entertainment games system needs some form of RAM. I remember Super Mario World on the SNES, Super Nintendo Entertainment System. I wasn't born around that time, but it's something I used at a young age. And the Wii, Super Mario Bros. You need RAM in order to store progress data that you may have made during your game. So Atari's on Pac-Man used to make a high score of 600 or thousands, but the Atari never saved the high score because it never had anything to store the progress you made in RAM. So the RAM will store the progress data. For example, as I said, Atari games didn't save high scores. They had no storage of RAM. But SNES cartridges and Wii discs, games like Super Mario Bros. Would have RAM. You'd have RAM inside the system to be able to store the progress data, which will then be saved the flash memory or storage that you have on the system. So Super Mario World and Mario Bros. Is a good example because you had levels, you'd save your progress as you go along. So I'll just move on to the next slide now. And this is why you need flash memory or some sort of secondary memory, which you will come across the term secondary memory in 1.3. But once the player's progress has been stored on the RAM, it needs to be placed permanently in one space. When the system's turned off, it will save the data. So you'll save it to your hard disk drive if you're on a PC, or your solid state drive. But you want to save it because the RAM is volatile. So as soon as you turn your Wii off, I've done it before. Most of us, if we've owned a Wii, would have done it. You would have completed 10 levels or whatever. And I know someone in here would have done it before. You turn it off without saving, and that's your 10 levels gone. So this is a good example, really. The RAM will store the progress data, but it won't actually save the game. You need to save it onto your hard drive, flash memory, or solid state drive in order for you to then continue with World 9. I got there eventually. We won't talk about how many lives we lost on that one, though. Player's progress has been stored on the RAM. It needs to be placed, as I said there. I'll go over that again. So the progress data stored by the RAM will be saved onto flash memory in order to save level progressions, high scores, etc. So that would have been one good thing for Atari to do, they didn't have the technology at the time to be able to save high scores on your home system. Like parents, when they tried it out after I bought it, that I was getting some good points, but they were better because they had the memories of playing it from beforehand. It can also be used when the game has updates or patches. So a good example is Ultimate. You had an update I had to do before coming on. Bit of a panic, but I did it 2 hours before, so it's fine. But when the game has updates or patches, the new software updates, it can be saved to the cartridge, disk, console, PC. Always be saved in the storage system. So the storage system's in the headset for me, my Quest. Your updates will be saved onto that. So you always need some sort of memory storage to be able to save updates and progress and stuff like that. So I always leave that top sentence in, which says, as you can read, at the end of the meeting, I like to go over what we do in the next lesson. So here's actually what we're covering. This is the rest of it. So next week we'll be looking over secondary storage, I suppose to say, data capacity calculation. So how do you calculate how much capacity you got and how you take away, say you've saved a Word file that's 128 kilobytes, how do you take that off a megabyte, stuff like that. Common types of storage, so you've got your hard disk, solid state, flash memory. Oh God, what else is there? I think there's about one or two more. But there's examples of that. So Xbox. Actually, the Xbox. I think it has solid state, but I'm not sure. I will look into that for you for examples. And then storage and application, how it saves, the processes for that. I will read up on what it actually has, and I will update you on the Discord. Shameless plug there. If you go into the VR website, you go into the event, go to my channel, which is on the left, where it should maybe on the event, I'm not sure. There is a link for the Discord. You can join that, and you'll find out the latest updates, which I did put on there the other week. They had to push this one back a week. But next week should go ahead fine. There is nothing planned for next week. In fact, it's a penultimate week of school, thankfully. It's a bit of a mess. But I hope you enjoyed your time here, and you'll be back next week's presentation. Don't go anywhere yet, though. I think we're going to do a few questions, and I'll let you go. As I do every time, I have a special thanks at the end. So I'd like to thank Karen in this corner, Matthew in the corner in the back over there, and Lance in the corner over here next to the blue gentleman for moderating tonight. I'd like to thank you all. I'd like to thank any newcomers who've joined tonight. I know there's a few more interested tonight, and as it's been an extra week, I've gathered a few more people to come in tonight. And for those who didn't make it, the video will be on YouTube. Hi to those who are watching from YouTube for later on. If you get to this part of the video, maybe leave a comment. Hope that you'll come back to learn more about computer science with me again soon. Finally, I'd like to thank everyone who's attended tonight's presentation. It does mean a lot to me. I'm doing this for a refresher myself to go over the courses I've done, but I also want to provide learning for others. I'll do a quick intro again. The introduction I did for myself 3 weeks ago. I am a student at the moment, but I am aiming to be a teacher for computer science in the UK, which will take me the next 6 years to get there. It's a long journey, but I'll learn a lot more knowledge. In the process, hopefully I'll keep this going. It will catch up with what I've learned so far. So I think that's the last slide before I say goodbye. So if you have any questions or want to have a conversation with anyone in the room, myself or anyone, you're more than welcome to stay for a while. Hope you enjoyed a conversation with someone. I am going to quickly open up the host panel for participation questions. But I'm going to see if Karen wants to say anything before we go. And if there is any hand raises, we'll do that after Karen if she wants to say anything. If not, that's about it.
I just want to say, let's give a big round of applause to Merlin. He's right in the middle of taking exams right now at school and trying to put this together, make slides, work with the crazy technology here in AltSpace. So give him a big round of applause.
Thank you.
I didn't know it was a megaphone. Oops. Sorry about that. No, it was a great show, though. Thanks a lot. It was very informative.
No problem. Okay, I will close you off. Microphone. Dismiss that. I don't think there's any questions. So I'm going to unmute all participants. Again, I'd like to thank you all for coming, and I hope you had a good time. Also, just a reminder, anyone who needs to see the video again, it will be on the YouTube channel at the back. That's the name, and it should be uploaded on there within the next 5 minutes after ending the schedule. Thank you again.
Thank you, Merlin.
Thank you.
Back up. Go.
Thanks, Merlin. Sorry.
Bye.